Hi, it's Wyndham. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to this awareness series, Let's Talk About Blueprints. Today, I want to talk about resistance. And you may remember, if you haven't watched part one, go back and watch part one very quickly, because from that you may remember that our blueprint, the function of our blueprint is to automate our reactions to input stimulus. Now, when it comes to resistance, that is also true. So when we find ourselves in a conversation or watching the news or sat in a meeting, whatever interaction we're having, it is very common to feel our emotions rising, right? That is our blueprint kicking in, okay? Now, if you listen to part 4, which was beliefs and truths, the things we think are true and the things we think we believe, this whole subtopic within Let's Talk About Blueprints can be resistance inducing, right? I'm very aware, just from my own experience, this took me a long time to come to and accept. So I fully expect some of you not to listen past this point. I further expect some of you to get to the end and not believe it, not dismiss it, ignore it, which is absolutely fine. I'm not a dictator. You can live your life however you choose to. The question to ask at the end of this video is, well, how is that working out for you? Because our resistance is fundamentally based on the things we think we believe and the things we think are true. Now, in the last video, I spoke about how our beliefs and truths, fundamentally all they are is stabilizers. They are embedded within our blueprint across all areas of our life, but they stabilize our view of the world. They bring some predictability and some certainty into our lives because we as human beings really struggle with uncertainty. We want things to be defined and predictable. And so the things we think we believe and the things we think we hold to be true are really just stabilizers. Because if you take, there are nearly 8 billion people on this planet, right? What is true? What are truths? How true are beliefs? You can, well, I live in the UK and used to live in London, really cosmopolitan, lots of people from lots of different parts of the world, and very strongly held beliefs that conflict with each other. So, what is happening when we feel that emotion rising? Fundamentally, one of our stabilizers, at least one, possibly many, but one of our stabilizers is under threat. Now, our blueprint is the automatic reaction. So we don't have a thinking process when this is happening, right? We are confronted by a thought, an idea, an action, whatever it might be, and our blueprint automatically interprets and reacts. And what is driving how we react is whether what is being said, done, explained, whatever it might be, is whether that contradicts or aligns with one of our beliefs, one of our truths. So if we're in our little echo chambers, we're not triggered. Well, we might be triggered, but it will be righteous indignation because everybody else is saying the things that we think we believe, so we must be right. But when we're outside of our echo chambers, when we're outside of people who think the same way we do, when we are outside of people included in the same groups that we are, whose behaviour has adapted to the inclusion criteria demanded of that group, when we are outside of that, we are much more likely to find ideas, philosophies, actions that fundamentally conflict with what we believe the world should look like because of our stabilizers. Or we are confronted by a belief about us that conflicts with one of our core beliefs or truths that stabilize our view of ourselves, that make predictable and certain an uncertain world. So what do we do? Because as you will remember from the 3 phases of the blueprint, a huge number of these beliefs and truths are given or imposed upon us because of the inclusion criteria to be part of a group for our safety at a point in our lives when we had no awareness and no choice. And these things sit dormant. They're not needed until they are threatened. And then they fire up and we're suddenly enraged by these ideas other people are proposing. The question to ask is, how is that certainty, how is that absolute predictability of the world working out for you? There's two ways to look at it. One is, well, how is it impacting my overall life? Like, what are the opportunities available to me as a result of my assumed beliefs and truths? And what if there was a broader interpretation of that belief or that truth that opened up opportunity to me? The second way to look at it is, well, how do I want to be? How do I want to feel? How do I want to interact with people who are different from me? Really, do I want my life to be peaks and troughs of rage and then frustration and then more rage and then frustration and a tiny piece of equilibrium where I'm surrounded by people who believe the same things I think I believe? Or do I want to be more open? Do I want to come into situations confident that whatever is said, whatever is done, within reason, right? There are actions and choices of language that the action and the language is contrary to our beliefs. And we're perfectly entitled to feel a reaction to those things. Perfectly entitled to that. My challenge is how many of the things we react to are genuinely our beliefs, our truths, and how many of them are reactions to given, conditioned, or imposed truths and beliefs. Because if we are allowing ourselves to be triggered because of beliefs that are not genuinely ours, then whose life are we living? This, for me, is the fundamental crux of Write Your Own Blueprint. It's how do we create a truth, a belief that supports us in our exploration of ourselves and of the world around us. Because I spent a huge amount of my life rigidly adhering to what I thought to be my truths and beliefs. I was convinced that nothing that wasn't proven by science could be true. And that kept me safe, essentially, because I now, on reflection, can look back and think, actually, what I was deeply afraid I would be excluded from the groups I was part of if I came in and started talking woo-woo. Now, I used to use that term quite a lot, woo-woo, and I'm more and more uncomfortable with it because it has such a dismissive connotation. But that was who I was, and I made that who I was. It wasn't a trait I had, it was who I was. So moving away from that core belief of who I was, remember, our truths and our beliefs are stabilizing our view of the world and ourselves. So the view of myself was stable because it was, well, I'm going to demand proof in every instance. And if you can't give me proof, I will dismiss what you have to say. And then I asked myself that question, how is that working out for you? Late 30s, just before I turned 40, my life was not going the way I wanted it to, professionally at least. And even my private life was being heavily impacted by my professional life. So how is that working out for you? Not well. Really not well. So what do I want to be? Do I want to double down on the fact that I feel right and miserable? Or do I risk my identity, my perception of myself, the view I hold of the world? Do I risk that and explore new ideas? God, it was so difficult, and I resisted it for so long. And then I read a quote from Professor Brian Cox. For those of you not in the UK, you may know him. He's becoming globally more famous, but he is a physicist. I think he used to be in a band in the UK many years ago, but he's now this incredible voice of physics and, the science of the universe and things like that. And I read a quote from him that said, paraphrasing slightly, but we do not know what makes up 96% of the universe. There is a fundamental lack of understanding. Now, I read that and just went, what? I've spent my whole life applying the idea that if you can't prove it, I'm not going to go with it. And then here is a scientist saying, well, actually, modern instrumentation, modern scientific methods, all of that stuff can only observe and monitor 4% of what makes up the entire universe. So what then do I do? Do I dismiss Professor Brian Cox? This is a globally recognised and respected scientist offering updates and a perspective of what the scientific community is thinking and exploring and investigating and proving and disproving. Do I dismiss him because what he says threatens my core belief? Actually, no. What I do is I embrace that. And I say, well, okay, so if this epoch of scientific discovery has recognised that there could be up to 96% of whatever all of this is that we can't measure, we cannot monitor, we cannot observe, but we have evidence somewhere that suggests very strongly that this stuff exists, whatever it might be. Well, that suddenly frees me from my core belief. It offers me a little lifeline that transforms the millstone of proof to like a life vest of freedom to explore. Because if science doesn't know what 96% of the universe is, then I can explore anything. Because there is no telling what will be disproved, what will be discovered, and what will be recontextualized from a scientific perspective in another 5, 10, 50, 100 years. Well, and that just gives me freedom to look at anything. So when I am triggered, when my emotions kick in, when my blueprint automates my reaction, I no longer fall into argument mode. I am no longer trying to prove myself correct. I'm aware of the reaction. And all that reaction does is give me a little inkling, a warning, a little flag going up saying, hey, Wyndham, one of your truths, one of your core beliefs is being threatened. What do you want to do about that? Well, actually, what I want to do about that is I want to find out what that core belief is. I want to find out what truth am I basing my life on that I probably am not aware of. Because in this phase 3, where I'm writing my own blueprint, I want it to be mine. I want it to reflect my experiences. I want it to embody what I have found to be true. I want it to represent the beliefs that I hold dear, that align to my core values. I don't want to react in a way that has been given, imposed, or conditioned upon me anymore. And that is terrifying. I'll be honest with you. It has been a process of deep uncertainty. It has been a process of fear at times. Because once you find one of these truths or beliefs that isn't true, what does that say about all the others? How many of these things are truly ours? And how many of them have been provided for us? And you know what? If you go if you go looking for them, you pressure test them and they remain true, brilliant. You can tick that one off the box for the time being. Because like Brian Cox says, at the moment, 96% of the universe is, we don't know what it is. But in 10 years, that might be 93%. At which point, we owe it to ourselves to re-examine what we think we believe. It is an ongoing process, and it requires deep compassion for yourself, curiosity as to, oh man, this is not my fault. And it is my responsibility to look for it and address it. I leave you with that. I know from personal experience, this particular subject is very challenging. And I was introduced to a quote by one of my yoga teachers a number of years ago. And he said, "What we resist persists." I leave you with that. I wish you a joyful? If you're called Joyce, I wish you a joyful. Or you know a Joyce, whatever. But I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon.